As I stare out from behind my rose-tinted glasses, I gotta say, Sony had some pretty banger franchises on the PS2. And pretty high on that prestigious list is the Jak series, and it's not hard to see why. Jak and Daxter could be argued to be one of the best collectathons ever made, with its tight controls and amazing level design. And Jak 3 is a wonderful conclusion to the series, refining down everything that came before into this fun little Mad Max style romp. Hell, even Jak X, a spin-off racing game, is remembered as a blisteringly good vehicular combat racer in an era where the genre was starting to die out. But you'll notice there's one game that's suspiciously missing from that list. One I'm purposefully not mentioning. No, it's not The Lost Frontier. Read the title again? Jak 2 is in a very weird situation, because by all metrics it is a competent and well put together game, and it is beloved by a lot of people, which confuses me because this game is infuriatingly designed. Probably not helped by the fact that it doesn't even have the unmatched defense of nostalgia for me. I first played this game back in 2016, 10 years ago. I hated it then, and I hate it in the big 26, only now I can articulate my complaints beyond the incoherent rage. I'm Graham, your second favourite gremlin on the internet, and today we're discussing why Jak 2 sucks, actually. Now, it would be really easy to start with the absolute next step of a tonal shift between Jak and Daxter and Jak 2, because that deserves a whole ass peer-reviewed study. But it's low-hanging fruit, and I'll get to it later. What I really want to talk about first is Jak 2 at a mechanical level, because it's genuinely a mess. The game, at its core, can lovingly be described as a platformer trying to be a shooter. And that's not inherently a bad thing. Their contemporary Ratchet & Clank is quite literally just that. The issue there is that whereas Insomniac tried to balance the shooting and the platforming, and they kind of mesh, albeit awkwardly for the first couple of games, Jak 2's shooting and platforming are like two people in a loveless marriage sat at the opposite ends of a really long table eating dinner. Because there's basically zero interaction between the two mechanics. Platforming is almost identical to how it was in Jak and Daxter, i.e. amazing, but the gunplay is shockingly bad. See, while most third-person shooters have the camera somewhat close and over the shoulder-ish, Jak 2 is far away and pointed at your back, and that's where a lot of the issues lie. Because of how the camera is set, it is basically impossible to reliably aim. So you kind of just wiggle your movement stick until you're aiming somewhat in the direction of the enemy you're trying to shoot, which only sometimes works when you're in range. The game gives you a way of mitigating this garbage aiming by locking onto targets after you've meleeed them. But that kinda makes it feel like the guns were added as an afterthought and the melee was supposed to be the focus, and they flipped it some point in development. I haven't looked too deeply into it, this is just mostly rambling. And it's decent enough against the melee enemies, but you can imagine how counterproductive having to be in melee ranges in a shooter. Especially in the numerous situations where the game throws like 10 plus dudes at you at the same time. Doubly so because the enemy gunfire seems to be coded as one guard at random will become American Sniper, and that's not on a timer or anything. More like every guard is rolling dice, and sometimes you can just die in 4 seconds because everyone decided to roll 20s together. And even without the stars aligning to remove your ability to sit comfortably, you have the added issue of health. I need you to look at this health ring thing. How many hits do you think you can take? If you guessed 8, you would be wrong, technically. Because while there are enemies that do 1 pip of health, the vast majority do 2, meaning that in a shooter, you have 4 health. 4. That's plenty for a collectathon platformer, but nothing when you're in a gunfight. I'm going to quickly introduce you all to the concept of game feel. It's pretty simple and simultaneously complicated idea about how people react and interact with your game. Very basic terms, if a game is too easy, the player will get bored, too hard, they'll get frustrated, and one thing you definitely want to avoid is the player feeling cheated, intentionally or otherwise. And how Jak 2 conveys its health bar, along with how few health pickups the game actually hands out, it's frustrating and feels like everything is either doing too much damage or demanding mastery of a game from a new player. And then we have the checkpoint situation. Checkpoints in Jak 2 are set up like collectathon checkpoints, where they're popped down at the start of a zone, or a decent way into one where reaching it again after dying is a little more hassle than most people are willing to put up with. Once again, that's fine on paper, and once again I have to remind you that Jak 2 is not a collectathon. Jak 2 is a platformer shooter, and because they are very stingy with those middle checkpoints, in most cases if you die you go straight back to the start of the level. No passing go, no collecting £200, except in that one mission with the lurker totem for some reason. The only game that saves your progress. Huh. And there's no mission where this is more painfully obvious than the water slums, where the game intends for you to shoot from one end of the slums to the other, through like 80 guards that drop in all around you. You can't avoid them in the water because the game just insta-kills you. Unless you know where you're going or what you're doing, you can't run past everything because the dropships have guns that cannot miss if they lock on. And even if you reach the exit, if you're killed before the end mission message finishes, back you go to the start of everything. Editing Graham here. It appears I've got this all locked in my head because I didn't actually have to go to the start of the mission again. It just sent me to where the start of the mission is, because this game hates me. Quick correction, but back to the video. This level is infamous, and for a very good damned reason. But it does let me segue quite well into another genuinely questionable part of the game: the open world. This game is in fact open world, but it's that kind of open world that makes you wonder why they made it open world. Oh right, GTA 3. Yeah, this game is basically Kids Bop GTA. You go to a place, talk to a guy who will, in most cases, tell you to go to a different place to start a mission, where you go and visit 8 locations and complete said missions there. The issue is that, unlike how most people played Jak and Daxter when they completed each area in order, you have to revisit the locations at minimum 3 separate times to complete 3 very samey tasks. This would be kind of tedious if you did this all at once, but ending up back in the building again throughout the story makes you feel like you're just padding the runtime, intentional or not. But to back up a bit, what really makes the back and forthing of going to these areas so much worse is that there's no quick way of getting from one quest giver to the mission start points. I need you to look at this map. Here are the mission locations. Now here are where the quest givers are. Haven City is basically a loop. You spend an awkwardly long amount of time meandering around the place while the same oddly intense music plays on a loop. And what makes this even worse is that everything that isn't Azuma basically handles like a soggy brick. These things barely turn, which is a cool joke in and of itself because the city's loop is also a slalom. And even if you do get Azuma, you'd have better get good at driving because these things are as durable as my self-esteem. And don't even get me started on the Titan suit, which is one hell of a misleading name. This thing handles like ass, platforms like crap, has no way of dealing with ranged enemies, and is as durable as a tech bro's ego. This thing is awful. And the fact that the game has the audacity to make me use it 3 goddamn times, one of those underwater with oxygen mechanics, is an affront aimed specifically at me. Anyway, open world. Then you suddenly realise that there's nothing to do in Haven City. They're a sprawling labyrinth of a map, and it's populated by sweet FA except 2 types of minigame where you either race through rings or try to figure out where a precursor orb is located in the world and under the time limit. Which is fun, but not do it multiple times fun. Otherwise, it's just going to missions and getting chased by the Crimson Guard because these assholes are on such a hair trigger and are bloody relentless. Not to worry though, dying outside of missions has basically no downside at all. Get to it. This is a very textbook example of the open world rush that happened specifically after GTA 3, where games would have expansive maps that failed to justify themselves. Maybe because they were built before they knew what they were doing with them, but it just adds so little to the actual experience. Hilariously though, the missions that happen in the open world are actually probably the best in the entire game. Not enough to actually write home about, they're still kinda samey, but they're decent enough, I suppose. Except the escort missions, of course. Oh, and the water slums mission. Actually, screw that mission is double-layered ass with ass frosting. What the hell were they thinking? But now, my intrepid viewers, we can't delay any further. We need to talk about the story and everything that comes with it. And biting the bullet, we need to talk about the absolutely insane, borderline psychotic tone shift between Jak and Daxter and Jak 2. Because we went from this to this.
I've been looking for you for 2 years! Say something! Just this once! I'm gonna kill Praxis!
In 2 very short years, we went from Bouncy Collectathon to
This isn't your granny's video game.
So, quick breakdown. The gang opens the big door at the end of Jak and Daxter, big monsters come spilling out, gang fly through the now portal and get separated in the portal. Then Jak and Daxter land in this weird future city, are immediately picked up by some soldiers, and Jak is pumped full of dark eco for 2 years. Specifically wanted him for some reason, by the way. The game doesn't really explain it, I don't think. Daxter finds an understandably earth-shatteringly fuck-ass mad Jak, busts him out, and they join an underground resistance to take down Baron Praxis, stop the metalheads, you know, those weird portal creatures, and save the world. This drab, miserable world. I need to keep talking about the tone of this game because goddamn, that's some whiplash. The setting of Jak 2 is borderline post-apocalyptic, set in a city under a totalitarian regime where crime and violence are rife. But this is only on a superficial level, because the game is very tell don't show with the whole suffering and misery. Now, this is probably because Naughty Dog up to now had only made platforms and a bunch of knockoff looking games in the 80s and early 90s, and they sure as hell had never made an open world game before, but there's basically nothing to show any of how bad it really is. It just got a bunch of people walking around and just existing, and there's no more Crimson Guard presence than you'd see cops in GTA. It is otherwise a mostly weird hodgepodge of city themes with a few slums attached, so no different from Detroit or something. I don't know, I'm British. The closest the game ever really gets to, hey guys, things are kinda messed up, is with the lurkers, who are back as just slave labour now. However, this is undermined by A, them only being in 2 basically delivery missions, and B, the only lurker NPC having a silly voice and talking in broken English.
Oh, sorry. You great guys. Ruder not forget. Ruder pay you back, you see.
I'm not sure what they were going for with this one, actually. Otherwise, the only thing the game really does to sell the tone is to just mute the colour palette a lot, which is fine on a surface level, but you also have to dig a little bit deeper and give something more than just, it's grey. There are other colours than grey, Naughty Dog. Oh, just remembered another bit of tonal weirdness. The game randomly makes you drop everything in this serious and gritty story to play a rhythm game and also whack-a-mole. Seemingly out of nowhere. It's easier not to question it, honestly. Then there's the story itself, and the problems there are kinda twofold, with one of them compounding the other quite significantly. First and foremost, the character writing is often weak at best, borderline nonsensical at worst. A lot of characters are just one-dimensional and exist as quest givers, but never really build from there. You've got Torn and Ashlyn, who are gruff and gritty and antagonistic towards the duo, and Pekka, who thinks he's clever and is antagonistic towards the duo. But that's all they ever really are. Now, I'm not saying a one-dimensional character is inherently bad. On the contrary, Vin is just the paranoid genius archetype, and he's a genuine delight to see freak out and over-animate all over the screen, where I only wish he didn't give me missions that I absolutely hated. Yeah. And there's Crew, the amoral crime boss who hasn't seen his Todger in 2 decades, but damn if the way he moves around the scene and the way his voice actor portrays him doesn't make him the most entertaining and slimy bastard in the game.
While smuggling the huge statue through the sewers, a grueling rainstorm flooded the whole place. The statue and 5 of my best men were swept away.
That's terrible.
Yes, a tragic loss. I've missed that statue ever since.
But that's fine. A little annoying, but fine. What's truly frustrating is when the writing just exists to move the story forward. There are several points in the game where they get tension between the characters, only for said tension to completely evaporate in the same cutscene, because otherwise that would drag the game to a standstill. Which are bad, but not bad, just kind of awkward bad. No, the actual bad parts come in the form of Kira, Errol, and the racing questline. So, first part of the questline, Kira and Jak reunite and have a somewhat tender moment explaining what the hell happened to Jak. You know, the 2 years of experimentation and torture and being in a strange place with no idea what's going on. So, cut to Kira getting unreasonably mad about Jak knowing Ashlyn, calling him out for working with Crew, and further calling him out for being a Dark Eco rage monster. You know, that thing he has zero control over, and is the result of 2 years of experimentation and torture. All the while, gassing up Errol, Crimson Guard commander and known power tripper Errol, probably on a list somewhere Errol. And all of this animosity and tension is almost immediately resolved in a later cutscene because they need to wrap up the story beat fast. The way it's written feels like they decided the script needed more drama, but had no idea how to do it, so they just shoehorned a schism between these 2 characters and called it a day. And then there's Errol, the worst written dude in the entire game. Because despite knowing that Jak is racing in the championship and where he usually hangs out, Errol, instead of doing his actual job, decides he's going to beat Jak in a race to prove he's the best and kill all hope for the people of Haven City by winning a race. Granted, Errol has a colossal ego and he's not particularly bright, but Jak is quite literally Haven's most wanted. The Baron has a hate boner specifically for him, but his right-hand man does not do anything with this knowledge because he is an unstable petrolhead with a chip on his shoulder, who, I might add, beefs it by driving into a month's supply of Dark Eco or trying to run Jak over while he's giving the Baron the business. Quick sidebar, but why is the Baron surprised to see Jak here? He's looking directly at the lineup before the race starts and Jak's face is uncovered. He knows Jak is here. What the actual hell? Also, fun fact, the guard alert outside the stadium after this cutscene has no consequences if you die, so there's no reason to waste your time trying to run away. They try to position Errol as some kind of rival, but he comes off as a sad, poorly written egotist that's more of an annoyance than an actual threat. But like I said, it's an issue that feeds into a larger problem, and that's that the story never really feels like it's going anywhere. Like you're going through the motions until the game decides it's time to jump to the next plot point. You never feel or see the effects of your actions in the world, and it just feels stagnant. And it has this unfortunate situation of feeling like you're the only one doing anything. You work for a crime syndicate and an underground revolution, but everyone else in these groups is just twiddling their thumbs or is completely incapable of doing anything while you're out doing Jak things, straight up jacking it. Like you're the only competent member of these groups. To use GTA as a comparison again, yeah, those games are also the protagonist as a one-man army type deals, but the supporting cast at least seems like they're doing something between levels. Speaking of, a lot of the issues with the pacing actually stem from how the game is laid out. There is no cohesion from mission to mission, which is not helped by you constantly returning to the same levels over and over throughout the game. The only part of the game that actually feels like it's going anywhere was the racing questline, and even that ends up being rather inconsequential. It's as though they wanted to keep the Jak and Daxter side objective mini-game setup, but didn't realise how much that would mess with the pacing of the story. And then suddenly, in the last 5% of the game, everything happens at once. The metalheads invade the city, and Jak has to take out their leader to save the day. But it also throws in that Crew was secretly working with the Baron to make a doomsday device out of nowhere, and that Core was the actual metalhead leader, which would be fine if A, there was anything beforehand that showed Crew knew how to make said doomsday weapons, or any weapons of any kind for that matter, or B, that Core wasn't already the most suspicious dude in the entire game. And then there's the Baron, whom we've shot twice at with guns while in his tiny exploding hovercar, being knocked through a scaffolding and immediately dying. Everything happens at such a breakneck pace in the last hour of the game, and there's no payoff because there was basically no build-up. It was just a mad rush to the end in a boss fight that genuinely kinda sucks. Jak 2 is a really decent game on a technical level. It visually holds up today, manages to be mostly loading screen free, and everything works as intended. The issue is that what's intended feels actively hostile to the player, like the game is punishing you for playing it. The open world is stagnant and vacuous like so many others of the time. The story goes nowhere and then suddenly jumps to the end, and the entire playtime feels like you're just kind of going through the motions. There are ideas here, but that's basically meaningless when the game is pulling itself in so many directions and not doing much with any of them. And that's my opinion of Jak 2 in a nutshell. I know it's not the most granular deep dive breakdown of every tiny mechanic and plot point in the game, but sometimes it's good to give it a first player kind of view because most people are only going to play these games once. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, maybe subscribe if you're feeling generous. Who knows, who cares, do what you want, it's a free country, I'm not your dad. Sorry it's taken so long to get this one. I've been a bit of a mental slump with videos, honestly. But I'm back now and we've probably got some things cooking in the background. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If you're craving more Gremlin between these really sporadic uploads, I'm live on Twitch 3 times a week, and the times are there and subject to change. I'm sorry, that just happens. Yeah. Have a good one. I hope to see you in the next one in about 5 more months.